this company made this thing, right? And you can see this looks really ancient. And what they did with this is they put a can inside of this thing and they filled it up with this kind of oily liquid. And then they had sort of microphones hooked up to it. And then they would use transducers to send audio signal into that and move the can around, right? And then that would create sort of an echoey kind of sound. And the reason it got the name Tel-Ray is that there's a company the guy who owned the company was called Ray. And anytime the workers there would come up with something new, they'd say, hey, let's tell Ray. And that's like serious. Yeah. So this article here, first tape delays were starting to need servicing because they were assembled with tons of moving parts component wear. Musicians and studio guys were in search of replacement parts, which may have contributed to the sales of this Ad-N-Echo. Right? So easily portable, less finicky delay unit that didn't need as much upkeep was something that became desirable. So this is the back of the unit, right? And this is the oil can right here. And here's a transducer. That's not a transducer. That is I'm having a brain freeze. I'm having a senior moment. Anyway, transformer. Here's another transformer over here. And looks like it has a some sort of tube in there. A couple of tubes. Okay, so that's one. And then that was in the 60s, and we're going to get into that. And then in the 70s, a New York City-based company called Electro-Harmonics that was based on 23rd Street. I think they're in Long Island City or in Williamsburg now. They started, they came up with something called a bucket brigade delay, right? And what a bucket brigade delay did is, you ever see like an old Western movie where there's a fire and then there's a bunch of people that are in a line and they're passing buckets of water to try to or sand to try to put out the fire? That's called a bucket brigade, right? And so what the bucket brigade did was they had a bunch of tiny little circuits that were one right after the other, and the audio signal would go through these series of components, and it would create a delay in the signal. So let's take a look at this. And the very first one was something called The Memory Man by Electro-Harmonics. Right, this was kind of one of the first ones. And then this is what they kind of look like now. This is the more, I actually owned one of these back in the 80s. Kurt Cobain from whatever band he was in with the drummer from the Foo Fighters. He used this on his guitar along with a triple chorus effect. So here's a little history. Developed in 1969 by Philips Research, the bucket brigade shuttles a stored analog signal through a consecutive series of capacitors, kind of like a fire brigade, hence the name. Signals pass through the bucket brigade circuits. They suffer from aliasing, which is a sort of like a high frequency schmutz. That's the only way I could think of it. You can hear it I hear it when I'm getting some of these isolated tracks because of the way these people have used phasing to sort of cancel out some of the other instruments. And it was a problem in DX7s in the 80s. You'd hear this really weird high frequency. It was almost like a whistle as part of the sound. So what they did with the bucket brigade circuit is they'd put a filter at the beginning and at the end to filter the sound. So these two delays here have a character to them that's different than the tape delay. And then this one was also popular. A lot of guitar players use this. This is one made by Boss, the DM2. And this has just been reissued over the past 5 or 6 years. So this is 1981. You know, the Memory Man was in the 1970s. Here's an ad from a television, like a magazine, right? Now available is a solid-state echo delay unit, which allows musical signals to be controlled as they pass from one register to the next, and enables delays to be produced from 5 to 320 milliseconds. So that's about a third of a second. So not huge delay times, without need for tapes, heads, discs, drums, or motors, or mechanical linkages. So again, they were going for something that was more reliable, that a touring guitarist or a gigging guitarist could take with them and not worry about it needing constant repair. Electro-Harmonics, 27 West 23rd Street, New York, New York. So right in the heart of the Flatiron District. 27 West 23rd Street, so that's just west of 5th Avenue, right? So that's right by the Flatiron Building. Interesting. Okay, so what does that do for us? Well, Pro Tools has emulations. All the DAWs now, pretty much standard, have digital emulations of these things, and we're going to work with them, and you're going to learn the characters and see how you can use these things. And then hopefully when you start creating your own music, you will have some facility with this stuff and you'll be able to do it. So, okay. So with that, for this week's assignment, you're going to do the same thing you did last week. I've got a session set up for you with all of these audio files, and you'll have to do the inserts here and just really mimic kind of what I'm doing. So I'm going to zoom in here. So now I've got here, let's first of all, let me go down here and let's do a new Command Shift and a new, we'll do a mono audio track. And let's go to our Avid, and I'm going to show you the Tel-Ray, which is here. Then there's the tape echo. And you need to go through your Pro Tools and let me know if you have all these, because if you don't have it, there's another thing that you'll have to download and install. I sent out that email for that. And then Avid, let's see, BBD. Where's that? Right here. And yeah, BBD. Okay, so let's put this. So I think the Tel-Ray came out before. So this is the Tel-Ray delay, right? So it has an input, it's got a tone, it has a mix, and an output. Variable delay, some variations. That's kind of like a variation on the way it echoes. The sustain is the number of echoes. It's like feedback. And then it's got a switch for an echo or a doubler. And we'll see the difference between the two of those. The next one is the tape echo. And you see how this looks a lot like that Echoplex. The only one we don't have is the Echo Rec, the one with the spinning disc. C'est la vie. I have actually a couple of guitar pedals that do that digitally. So this is our tape echo. And let's take a look at some of these controls, right? So these tape echoes typically don't have a very long delay time. But what the digital ones do is they have an expanded delay, which basically doubles. So if I were to just take this right now, and you see that it goes up, I drag this all the way to the right, it changes the delay time. The most it can have is 600 milliseconds. If I turn the expanded delay on, it multiplies that to 4 times the amount, so 2,400 milliseconds. That's almost 2.5 seconds. So it goes from 0.6 of a second to almost 2.5 seconds. So that's very helpful if you're trying to do something at a slower tempo to get a rhythmic effect. Oops. So tapes hiss, right? So if you want to hear some of that sound, you would turn that on. Then these are head tilt. I'm not quite sure what that does, but it has an effect on the sound. And wow and flutter is what happens when the tape gets old and the heads are sort of, they need to be demagnetized a little bit. and yeah, they need to be demagnetized a little. So then right here, you've got on and off, a bypass, right? You have feedback, which is the number of echoes. You have record level. Now, record level is how loud or how loud the record head is playing back. And that will let you know, that will actually change the sound. So that's another part of this, is that these also are tone shaping devices. They change the sound of your sound of your source. And then this is the mix, how much of the echo is in there. Now, notice that there is down here an input level and an output level. That is independent of here. So that if you turn the record level all the way up, you're going to have to turn the output down here. Otherwise, it's going to distort. And I will show you that, because volume balance leveling is very important to your gain structure. And that's something that I'm going to talk about. I typically talk about that in Audio MIDI too, but I'm going to cover it a little bit here because many of you in this class, if you're watching this videotape, have not taken Audio MIDI too. So the first bit I've got is up here. This is a, and let me mute this track. Make inactive. Okay. So I've got this little arpeggiated guitar figure here, right? Now, typically, I treat time-based effects like delay and reverb as putting on an aux track and using Ascend. And we did that a little bit in the previous assignment that you handed in today. But for this week's assignment, you're just going to insert it in the signal path. And I'm going to show, hopefully we'll have time at the end of this class for me to show you about the signal path. If not this week, definitely next week. So in this first one, I'm going to use 2 instances of the Tel-Ray delay. So let's look at the first one, how I've got this set up. So you see, I've got the input fairly high. It's somewhere between 7 and 8. The tone is a little dark on the left. Right, so the more to the right, the brighter the tone is, and the more to the left, the darker the tone of the delay is. A little bit more than half, and then the output is also up a little bit. So if you turn the input up, you may end up turning the output here down to not overdrive, but I'm okay with this particular thing. And then I'm going to play around with the variable delay here to show you that. And then the variation, the sustain, they're off. So the variable delay is off, the sustain is off, and the variation is up. And I've got this set as a doubler. So let's take a listen to what that sounds like. I'll turn it off. Nice and clean. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the mix all the way up so that all you're hearing is the wet sound. So that's on 10. And you're hearing that like almost like a vibrato. I turn the variation down and you don't hear that, right? So I turn the variation up and it gives me that sound. So that's a variation on the echo. Now, if I turn the variable delay up, you hear more do-do, 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 do-do. When it's all the way at fast, it sounds like it's all part of the signal. If I turn this up, it'll sound like a... Right, you can hear that it's like a regular delay. So with this one, we're just doubling it. And I've turned the variation all the way up. I've got it on doubler. Now we've got a second Tel-Ray, and let's take a look at this. So I've again got the input way up. The tone, this one is brighter. The mix is about half. And this time I'm using it as an echo, and I've got a good amount of sustain. So that means that there's some repeats. The variation, again, all the way up. And then, you know, the delay time, which is the variable delay, 3/4 of the way up. So let's take a listen to this. You see now when I stop it, you hear the second delay coming in with those repeats. And let me mute these two. So that's a nice, clean, what does variation do? You got that, right, Daniel? I explained that? The variation, it changes the pitch a little bit, and it changes varies the way the echoes are. And it might even do something rhythmically. I'm not quite sure. It's hard to tell because the delay time is not long enough with this, but it definitely plays around with the way the echo works, or the way it sounds. Okay. Now, this is a nice clean, just a little tiny edge on the amp breakup. But when I add these two in, it changes the quality of the sound. Now, let me try one more thing here. Let me open up this first Tel-Ray and let me zoom in. And let me turn the input all the way up, and then I'm going to turn the output down a little bit so that it doesn't distort. And let's see if it changes the sound even more. More time. Yeah, so it doesn't really drive the sound that much, right? Not as much as I thought it would. Okay, so what's the assignment, right? So right here, Claudia, I know that you know this stuff, but Mercy and Daniel and Jason, did Fawn go over, Professor Segerson go over markers last semester?
Briefly.
Okay. So I've got a marker on every one of these bits. And if you double click on this little badge here, let's see, edit memory location comes up. And if you look at the bottom here, there's a comments area. And what I've done is I've given you the instruction. Right, so the chorus, that it's with the doubling here, the doubler gives you sort of a sense of a chorus. Now you can also go here, right here, and you can add you could see the comments. Oh, the comments aren't there. They're only on the, sorry, that's something else. Right, they're only on the here. So, you know, if you want to open this up and copy and paste this onto a document so that you know what everyone is supposed to be. Okay. So that's the first one there. And it really, markers and memory locations are really great. Another thing you can do is you see that this one here, the number is 1 right here, right? Okay. And then this next one here, this is marker number 2. So what's great about this is if you've got an extended keyboard, it makes it very easy to navigate around. So if I am going to type in on my extended keyboard, and I'm going to show you another way to do this. Period, the decimal point 1 decimal point, it will go to the first marker. Decimal point 2 decimal point will go to the second marker. Decimal point 3 will go to the third marker, right? So it's great for navigating back and forth through sessions. And that's like a really great thing to do when you're mixing and you want to see, hey, does the first section, how's the volume of the verse versus the bridge and the chorus? You know, you can just quickly navigate. So if you look at my counter up here, actually, let me get the big counter window. So I'm going to hit return. So that's the beginning of the session. And I'm going to type in decimal point 1 decimal point, goes to measure 2. Decimal point to decimal point goes to measure 17. That's the second example. 32. Now, another way to access that is to go right here and memory locations, right? Now, let me show you something here. I'm going to zoom. Let's see if I can do this. Okay, I know this is hard for you to see, but I can't zoom in on this because I got to use the mouse to hold this open. Oh, I can. Okay, great. I just thought of a new technique. So if you notice next to memory locations, it's got the command and then a number with the circle, with that circle around it. That's the key command for that, right? And that, unfortunately, for most of you, that's command and then 5 on the numeric keyboard as opposed to this. So an extended keyboard, you don't need it for my classes, but if you're going to do this going forward in any software, having an extended keyboard works, really helps you out. So let's go back here. And so what I did was, I could go here to my window and go to memory locations, which is another name for markers. And then you can see right here that it gives you all your marker numbers and what they are. And then it tells you what, these are other functions. You could set up window sets, all sorts of crazy things with this. That's not for this class. We might do that in Audio MIDI 1 later on in the semester. So what I typically do is if I'm scoring a film and I've got the whole act on one session and it's like 15 minutes long, the first act of an hour of TV film, I'll have this guy on my second screen on the right so I can take a quick look at it. You guys have laptops, and it can be resized by hovering over the bottom, and you see again it changes to the cursor changes, and you can make that smaller. But that's maybe you could put it up there, and then you could see it, and then you could just click on those, and it takes you to them as well. So that's kind of cool. Memory locations are really, really great. I use them all the time, many ways. So okay, so that's the first bit, right? Now with this next one, right? What does that sound like? A song you've heard before that we heard last week, right? It sounds like U2. So that's what I want you to do with this particular one. So you're going to use mod delay 3 and you're going to set up a stereo edge style rhythmic pattern. One side is going to be dotted eighth note and the other side a dotted quarter note. You will adjust the mix of each side of the delay so that you can hear all three parts. Adjust the feedback and low pass filter to taste. So I'm going to go over low pass filter. I haven't done that yet. And feedback we've gone over a little. So, right. So with this one, I've got mod delay 3 in here. And I've got sync turned on. If you notice, I've got a tempo right here, all preset for you and the time signature preset for you. So we've got a dotted eighth note on the left and a dotted quarter note on the right. And then the dry and wet down here, right? I'm going to make it completely dry. And you just, right, so now I can hear both sides. I can hear the echo and I can hear the dry signal pretty even, not completely evenly, but pretty good. Because you got to realize that you got all these cross rhythms that are going to be going on and you want to make sure that they don't clash. And now I'm just going to adjust the dry on the other side. You see how it, okay, so listen to what happens as I bring the signal up and I get into about 42% here. It completely changes the feel. You hear that? That's not the deep at top. So you got to really adjust it. You'll find with You'll find with delay, that's when you're doing it this way, that you won't need a lot of delay to get it to sound that you can hear it. I'm going to show you in one of them going forward where I've got it at like 8% wet, and it's plenty. Now, I'm going to make the left side, the right side dry, and actually going to turn the volume on the right side down. So you see you've got the gain over here. So now we're only going to hear the left side. Right, so we're only hearing the delay out of the left side. And I'm going to turn the feedback off, and that's 0. So you're only getting a double, right? You're getting the sound and then the repeat of the sound. And the more I turn it up, the more echoes there are. See how long that goes on for? So you want to make it so that you hear it, but that it's not so much. Now let's take a listen to the low pass filter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it completely wet, and I'm going to turn the low pass filter off. It's not what I want to do. Okay, let's see. All right, we're going to hear both sides, unfortunately. So I'm going to turn the low pass filter down. Yeah, let me do something here. This is not really doing what I wanted to do. I can't seem to make it. I'm not just getting the left side. There we go. Okay, so now we're getting just the left side, right? So let me turn the low pass filter off. And you're getting an exact copy timbrally of the original audio. And that's fine, but you add character by taking some of the high frequencies off. And that's what a low pass filter does. It allows low frequencies to go through and attenuates the higher frequencies. So this becomes very dark, right? And that's too much. You got to tune your ears. So just play it. Listen to the feedback and stop it, you know. So what that does is that it helps the delay to kind of stand out and it gives it its own space, because what you're doing here is you are adding a lot more music, and if it's all taking up the same frequency spectrum, right, it gets very cluttered very, very quickly. So that's the second one. Now on the third one, we're going to do two different echoes. We're going to use tape echo, and I've got some delay in here too. Oh well. Okay, so we're going to use tape echo, and we're going to set up the sync function to a half note, and we're going to adjust the feedback and record level to get a gritty echo. And we're going to, whoops, I misspelt that. Sorry, I apologize. Balance it with, oh boy, the mix and play around with the head tilts and wow flutter controls to add some lo-fi glitter. All right, so let's take a listen to this little piano part here. It's just a few notes, right? So let's see what I've done here. And then I've got another delay. All right, I've got this here too. Okay, I'm going to have to... right? So you see how the kind of character that adds to that, right? It's really kind of cool. I love that. So let's try this. Let's take a look at this, what I've done here. Now, I've got this set up. So a half note here is 405 milliseconds. So that works. Yeah. So I've got, right. So what you do is you go here, this little triangle, and you select this. Now, if it doesn't say 405 milliseconds, it might be because you want too long of a note that doesn't work on the original 600 millisecond delay. So you might have to add the expanded delay. And I think I have an example of that later on. And then you see I've got some feedback and I've got the record level turned all the way up. I've got the mix set here. It might be a little bit hot. And so let's take a listen and I'll play around with all these different parameters. So let me play this. And let me turn the record level down. So you're not hearing anything right now, right? So I turn the record level up. It's still pretty clean sounding. Let me turn the mix up so you hear more of it. It sounds like the piano, just a little bit darker, right? So let's play around with the head tilt. It's a very subtle, but the wow and flutter is going to get us something. Hear that? How it's wah, wah, it's sort of vibrating, the pitch. And also adding a little grit on that last chord. So now I'm going to turn the mix down and I'm going to turn the record level up and it'll add even more grit because it's overdriving the input. You hear that? Right? It's overdriving that into a beautiful distortion. And you want to pay attention. I've got this soft enough so it shouldn't be an issue, but you want to make sure that your output is not getting into the yellow and red. If that's the case, whoops, excuse me. You've got this little volume slider right here, the clip gain. You could just turn that down. I'll go over this when we do audio in Audio MIDI 1. Claudia, you know what that is. Okay, so that's the first thing. And I don't have this written in there, so maybe you'll take some notes. So on the felt piano, which is the third example, you're also going to add this Moogerfooger. And you have to make sure that you have this, all right, in your plugin folders. If you don't, you'll have to let me know, and then I'll send you a link to install everything. I found one complete installer, which doesn't come in my Avid account. I had to go to another page. So this is a Bucket Brigade delay. And it was made by the Moog company, which was founded by Robert Moog, Queens College graduate I've talked about. So this has delay time, feedback, and this has a high pass filter. So it gets rid of the low frequencies, and you can turn that on and off with this right here. And then you've got short and long delay times, and then this is the mix, right? So feedback is the number of echoes. Delay time is how long until the delay starts. You can make it a short or a longer one. So in other words, just like on the tape machine, you had one that went to 600 milliseconds, and then the other one went to 2400 milliseconds. I don't know what this is. They don't have it written there. It's just long and short. This is how much of the delay is in the signal. High pass cuts off low frequencies from the echo. You turn that on and off. Frequency is the number of echoes. And then you've got a drive circuit, which drives the input of this, right? So now let's add this in. And you can really hear it's like a really funky sound, but it's beautiful. So let's play around with this, right? So I'm going to turn the mix off. And I'll turn the drive down. So that turns down the output of the whole plugin. Interesting, right? So again, this is where you want to make sure and watch up here that you're not, which you're not. It doesn't go up that high, but it adds such a nice character to it. And let's turn the feedback down. Let me turn off the tape echo. So you're just hearing. And if I change the delay time, that's very short. Bring the delay time up. And that pitch warbling is authentic. If you move this on a delay pedal, and I have a Bucket Brigade delay pedal at my home, made by this company Maleco. It's really cool. It'll do that. So you want to find something that has like a little bit of a rhythmic groove to it, right? So I'm going to turn the mix up. So now we're only hearing the echo. We're not hearing the original sound. And I'm going to turn the high pass filter. So that's cutting some of the low frequencies out. They're not a lot because it's a high pitched note, but it does get rid of some of the mud. And then let's bring up the feedback. Nice. And then add the tape echo back in. I think it's a beautiful sound, right? So I'm using it to not only create additional music and as an echo, but I'm also using it as a tone shaping device. Okay, let's look at our melody guitar here. Okay, so what we're going to do with this one here is we're going to use some doubling using the mod delay 3 with some modulation. So we're going to go over that. Be careful of the mix balance and also careful with using modulation. So let me close that and let me open up mod delay 3. And notice I've only got a mono mod delay 3. So let me turn this on and let's hear what I've done. I'll bypass. So you notice that I've got no feedback, right? So it's only one echo doubling. It's 40 milliseconds or so. Let me turn that up to like 70 and see what it sounds like. So right there, you're hearing two attacks. I don't want to hear two attacks. I want it to sound like it's one instrument. And notice I've got that at about mid 40s, the dry wet, if I turn it off. So this is why kind of like Lukather style, right? And this is the modulation. So this adds, modulation is a synthesizer functionality. And what it is when you use a parameter from one function to affect the sound of another function. So if you use, let's say, one of your sound creating devices like an oscillator is a sine wave, and it's at a very low frequency so that it unfolds slowly, right? And you're getting pitch change. You can use that shape. You can't hear the low frequency oscillator because it's below our human, vibrating at like 15 cycles per second, which is below what we can hear. but you can use the shape of that to change the pitch or the volume of another oscillator, right? So that's what modulation is in a nutshell. It can be used to do so many things, but those are just two of the basic uses. So right here, we're going to use a wave, some sort of wave, which probably is a sine wave, to affect the pitch on the wet part of the signal. So I'm going to turn this completely off. Okay, so that's wet, completely wet, right? It just sounds like the other guitar just 40 milliseconds later. So I'm going to turn the rate up. And you're not hearing anything, right? This is how fast it's going. And the depth is how much of the pitch warble you're going to get. So that's too much. So you see how that does the Lukather thing? That's kind of what they were doing in that particular song. All right. And then to that, I'm going to add some of this Bucket Brigade Moogerfooger. And it's going to be a nice lead guitar feedback. And so I adjusted the delay time here. Very little mix. Let me turn it up. Right, you can hear how that's really muddy. That doesn't sound good. Back it off. And then play around with the feedback. I've got generous feedback on this because I've got it very low in the mix. So now we've got an electric piano here. Right? Sounds like SpongeBob. Claudia, that's funny. Okay, so we've just got this scale being played in eighth notes. And we've got our tempo here of 60 beats per minute right here. Okay? So what we're going to do here is the Brian May thing, right? So using 2 instances of tape delay, set up a Brian May style cascading delay. Yeah, play around with this, whether you need to set it to instrument or not. I'll show you that. Keep the record level low, the feedback at 1, and the mix fairly low for both plugins. You're going to have to click on the expanded option. Set one plugin to sync at a quarter note, which is 1,000 milliseconds, and the other to sync at a half note, which is 2,000 milliseconds. Then adjust the mix of each delay to get a good balance. All right, so let's take a look at that. So we've got our first tape echo here, right? And I've got the expanded delay on, and I've got a little bit of tape and flutter. Feedback at 0, record level is fairly low, and the mix is fairly high. Let's take a listen to that now. Right? So it's just basically like a little canon. And then add our second one in, which is set to 2,000 milliseconds or a half note. And now it's playing 3 notes at a time. Now, one of the benefits of doing this with a send is that you can pan one aux track to the left and another one to the right. Here they're both straight in the center, but we'll get to that. Just imitate these things. It's a good way to learn, you know. Okay, so now we've got a drum groove. And we're going to insert a BBD delay. And we're going to turn the expanded delay on, set the tempo sync to a dotted quarter note, and experiment with the chorus vibrato to see which you like. Set the mix and feedback so you hear the new groove, but that it blends well with the original. So you should have this in your folder. let's see. Sorry. Let me know if I've not switched the screen, please. So we've got this right here. And this is the BBD delay. So this is like that, the Echoplex, right? No, not the Echoplex, the Memory Man, the Memory Man. This is a takeoff on the Memory Man. So we've got it set for vibrato now. You might want chorus. You'll see expanded delay on. We've got the input at 12 o'clock. The mix is here. We got a little bit of feedback. We've got some depth, which is, I guess that'll give us the vibrato. And then the delay is set right here to a dotted quarter note. And notice I've got the output down to minus 7.8 because I've got the input up a little bit. So let's take a listen to this. Right. So if I turn the input up more, so you see how it gets really loud. So I'll have to bring the output down, but the output doesn't affect what this input is doing, which is driving the delay. So if I turn the mix all the way up, you're going to hear that the echo sound is a little distorted. Now, you have to be careful when you've got bass drum sounds like that because they're so boomy, right? That distortion on those things doesn't sound good. So I back that down to about here, and then I can just put this back. This is about minus 7 or something like that, and get our mix back down. Oh, let's get this back up. And also, it has to be turned on and off right here. All right, so make sure it's on. See how it completely changes the feel of the drums. Okay, so now this is the second drum. Same groove, but just a little variation. And on this one, this time use a send to mono aux track. Put BBD in the path, adjust the send fader to hear the effect. Again, activate expanded delay. This time turn the mix full up and set the delay sync to a dotted quarter note. Adjust the feedback to taste. This time turn the input dial up to full and the output on the bottom right down to minus 10 dB. Now remember when we tried that last, the kick drum started distorting, really getting woofy and muddy. Well, we're going to put a one-band EQ after the BBD delay and select high pass and reduce the amount of kick drum in the delay. So let me show you how to do that. So I've got this set up in the session you're going to get. You just have to plug in the two plugins over here, and I've got the bus probably set up right there. So let's turn on the BBD delay here. So you hear that is really muddy, the low end there. So see how I've got this set up here? I've got the input turned way up, the output down a little bit, mix all the way up. And I've got this stuff set up like this, right? Expanded delay on. Now, what I've done here with this EQ, this is the EQ3 one band, which you all have. I've selected high pass and I've rolled off everything up to 1,000 hertz. So let me do the sweep. So yeah, somebody had something to say. So now that it sounds, it's just like it's not getting in the way of the kick drum. Oh, I see. That was the saxophone. Okay, so we only have two more of these left. All right, so the first one is here. And this is Professor Hart playing soprano. So this time what we're going to do is we're going to use mod 3 delay as mono to stereo as an insert. We want to create a reverb-like ambience here. So you don't know the tempo of the audio file. We're going to turn sync off and adjust by ear, B-ear. Oof, I'm sorry for my bad spelling. Turn the dry-wet balance on one side to 0 and work on the opposite side. Try to find a time and feedback combination that adds space. You want to keep the dry-wet set somewhere between 8 and 15%. So not a lot of level there. And then fine-tune the taste. Then keep that side where it is and do the same thing to the other side. A nice stereo spread. So let me just show you this. Sorry about that. So if we go here to our plugin folder, right? Multi-channel plugin, and we go to Avid. Oh, if we go to multi-mono plugin, we go to Avid. I'm sorry. Go here and then go to Avid and then go to this is already stereo. That's why it's not doing what I want. Give me 1 second. So if I do it on audio 1 down here, that's a mono track. So I'm going to go here and go to Avid and see you'll get mod delay 3 and you'll get the option mono/stereo. That's what you want to do. You're going to add that and you'll notice that once you do that, the output meters go from just being 1 to being 2. So in other words, it won't look like this. It'll look like this. So I've already inserted the mod delay 3 in here. And let's take a listen to what I've done here. Right, so that's echo, but it's like a soft echo that sounds very similar to having a reverb around, and it's got a really nice width to it because, one is on the left and one is on the right, and Antonio's sax is in the middle. So that's similar to the David Bowie idea, except he's doing distinct delays. I want this to be almost like a wash. So you'll notice that sync is off, and I just played around with the different levels and feedback and some low pass filtering. So what I'm going to do is it would be, it'd be really nice if there was a mute button on this. So if I turn the dry off here. So that's the same. I bring it up. So that definitely sounds like an echo, right? So if I make it 200. That's a little too close, right? So if I do about 240. And then I bring the feedback up so that it's playing a couple of times. And right, so if I have no feedback, or hold on, 0 feedback. That's just like a long slap. But I bring the feedback up a little bit. Gets generous. You want to hear the multiple echoes. So you see how I stop it and I listen to the tail afterwards? And then back this down. So that's at 10% now. And you see how it sounds more like a reverb than echo because it's so low in the mix. And then you do something a little bit different on the other side. And then you use the low pass filter to tune that down. You don't want it to be so much that it chokes it, but I've, gone down to 6,300 hertz and about 7,000 hertz on this side. Okay, great. And then now on the last one, it's a different spot. This is the same song, but it's a solo. It takes. So we're going to use a mono mod delay 3 to add a modulated doubling to the sax, similar to the guitar, and then add the monos to stereo mod delay 3 after that first instance, and we'll add some echoes to that. All right, so let's take a look at this. So this is a mono, right? And I'm doing the modulated thing like we did with the guitar. So I got that at 32%. It's a little bit too much. I'm going to bring it down to like maybe about 20% and see what that sounds like. I like that. Okay, and then let's see what we're doing with this. So we've got, again, mono to stereo. So I'm doing a very similar bit as with the previous one here, right? So maybe I will bring up the level a little bit during the solo here. But see, notice I'm only at about 16%. Okay, great. So this is the deal. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 of these, right? Okay, Jason. All right, I'm going to send this out as an email, but basically undergraduate students are going to do pick 5 of these that you want to do. And graduate students, the one graduate student we have will do all 9 of these. So 5 and 9 is the number.
Professor, will this be available to watch again?
I'm going to try to get it up tomorrow. So it'll be basically from the point where I started teaching the lesson. You know what I mean?
Right.
I don't have that first thing with the Bowie and everything. Claudia, you can do as many as you want. 5 is fine. 6, 7, 8, 9. You just whatever you want to do, as long as it's more as 5 or more. Claudia's taken. She's taken. Very funny. 7. Claudia's taken all the classes, so she's in her last semester of the MAP. So doesn't know a lot of the delay stuff that we went over today, but she's used quite a bit. She's used delay in the past, so she's facile with this stuff. Yeah, I'll try to get this up tomorrow at some point, and then I'll send out an email with the assignment again, because there's a lot of people that missed class today, and hopefully they'll get it together. Yeah. So look, I think this is very helpful. I think that it will help you in the long run. We are going to be creating music, and I just want to talk to you for a second about when we meet in person in April. I'm trying to plan out something I'm going to call a sound safari, and we're going to walk around and we're going to record audio. Danny, the overachiever. Danny, if you want to do all 9, be my guest. Mercy, if you want to do all 9, you can do that. Just as long as it's 5 or more. We're going to go around and we're going to capture sounds, and I'm going to show you some interesting stuff. I'll bring a nice recorder with me. I'll bring this with me, and I'll bring a stereo microphone that will hook into here, and I will bring a contact mic, which we will hook up. We'll attach to things, and we'll make sounds, and we'll use those as audio sources, and then you guys will play around with those inside of Pro Tools. So one of our classes in person will be meeting, and we'll be walking around the campus doing a sound safari. Hopefully that'll be fun for everybody. So is there any questions on this today? Yeah, when it's a nice day, Daniel. We're not going to be out when there's snow on the ground and when it's 30 degrees out. I thought, fairly straightforward. Just follow along and try to do what I've done or follow the instructions, and you'll learn a lot by doing that. I've done that often. I've tried to copy effects that I hear I try to recreate them. You know, it's like if you're learning how to play jazz, you learn how to transcribe solos and you learn how to play along with records. You know, you play along with a solo, you get the person's phrasing, their feel, their time feel, all that stuff. This is no different. This is how you learn, just a way to learn. You know, you learn by doing and imitating. And then hopefully you'll understand the foundations and you can go forward. You know, and you know, one thing I wanted to say, which is a little weird just to talk to a few of you about this, is that, you know, things don't come out of nowhere. There's a long lineage, right? From Les Paul up to what we have now in Pro Tools and in Logic and in Reaper and in Cubase, all that stuff. There's a lineage where you could see how all this stuff developed. And you could see that there was a need for something. A mechanical thing was created. Then there were issues with that mechanical thing. And so they figured out another way to do something similar. And then eventually all that stuff got put into digital, right? So they wanted to have some sort of, as I said last class, they wanted to create the sound of a big space. So they came up with the tape delay. And instead of using a huge, big tape recorder to do it, some guy figured, hey, let's put it right into a guitar amp. Then they loved that sound so much that they wanted to make a separate unit out of that smaller bit. They did that. And then somebody figured out a way to do something different with a circular drum. But then a lot of mechanical parts, things were breaking down. So they figured out a way to do things, which is the oil can delay and the bucket brigade delay, where there was much less moving parts, so that the units were more reliable. And then the side benefit of that is that it gave a different character to the sound, and they utilized that character to the sound to add audio and aural interest into the music, right? So you could see that there's a trek, you know, a path that this whole thing develops, and it's really cool to understand all those things, so that when you are figuring out things to do to your own music, you can come up with, hey, that's really cool, but what if I tried this with that same technique and expanded on that? You know, like what I'm doing here. Well, not just one delay, but what about multiple delays in a row, right? We heard that with the Toto song very subtly, right? Or with the Police, where the delay only comes in at a certain time on the drums. So there's all sorts of stuff that you can figure your own things out, but learning the basics is what really will give you that foundation with which to come up with cool stuff. All right, my friends, I will see you tomorrow.
Yes. I do have a question, Professor.
Yes, Daniel.